I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of the families I work with one on one send their children to daycare. Both of my girls also went to daycare. They started at 12 weeks and they were in daycare until they went to kindergarten. I have a lot of experience helping parents navigate sleep with a wide variety of daycares across the United States and even in other countries. If you're expecting and you've just started the daycare search or you're planning to start it, you might be approaching it a little bit like I did when I was looking before I welcomed my first daughter. Maybe you're just hoping and praying that these wonderful care providers can figure out your child's nap schedule. And maybe even better, they can teach them how to nap independently. But here's the thing. Very few daycare providers are actually educated on sleep. And as you can imagine, they are hearing loads of different advice and opinions from parents. Not to mention that daycare sleep is unlike any other sleep your child will get. So, today I want to share the most important sleep related questions that you can ask a potential daycare. These are the questions that I wish I had thought about and asked when I was visiting daycares over a decade ago. And since you're probably multitasking right now, I've also created a free download that includes each of these questions. You can grab that by following the link in the show notes. But I also want you to listen to this episode because I'm going to explain why each question is important. Hi, I'm Allison Egidi, a pediatric sleep and wellness coach and a mom of two. I love to help parents find solutions. This is How Long Till Bedtime. I'm sure you have a long list of questions that you're asking or planning to ask potential daycares. These 12 questions that I'm going to share and discuss with you are specifically related to sleep. I'm going to start with the questions that are more related to the infants 12 months and younger. And then I'm also going to include some questions that are related to the toddler preschool age group. So those will come more towards the end. Question number one. What's the child to care provider ratio? For most daycares in the United States, the ratio will be 4-1, meaning there's going to be one care provider for every 4 infants. This ratio is fine when it comes to working on sleep schedules, but if you happen to find a daycare you love that has a smaller ratio for whatever reason, that might increase the opportunity for additional assistance related to naps. So, this is just something to keep in mind, and you just want to understand the ratio so you can have realistic expectations when it comes to assisting with naps. Question number two. What's your approach for naps in the infant room? Does each baby have their own schedule, or are you attempting to have babies nap on a similar schedule? So, a lot of daycares will have babies who are 12 months or younger in the same room. The nap schedule that works for a baby under 4 months is definitely unique. And then the schedule that works for a 4 month old is going to be very different from, say, a 10-month old. And so it's ideal if each baby is on their own schedule, or if they are targeting similar schedules, that those schedules are based on age appropriate nap schedules. For example, maybe they have a schedule that they target for 4 to 7.5 month olds, and then a schedule that they target for 8 to 12 month olds. If they are targeting a similar schedule for the babies, ask what the schedule is for each age group during that first 12 months. So you have an understanding in advance how they are approaching that schedule. Question number three. If we provide a nap schedule that's either guided by wake windows or nap start times within 30-minute windows, Will the care providers try to keep the schedule that we provided to the best of their ability? I think this might be one of the most important questions you can ask as it relates to sleep. Before 4 months, I have my clients share their child's ideal wake window and ask the daycare to work with that wake window. Once a baby has a more mature sleep rhythm and is ready to transition away from wake windows and get on to a consistent nap schedule, which happens between 4 and 5 months, I have my clients ask the daycare to work with a consistent 30-minute nap start time window for each of their naps. So at home, I actually like those start time windows to only be about 15 minutes. But this is where we have to be realistic about the daycare and the child to caregiver ratio because the caregivers are navigating most often multiple children's sleep schedules. And that 30-minute window is more reasonable. It allows them to still feel like they're hitting the schedule that you've asked for, but that they aren't being held to an unreasonable, this baby must nap at noon type approach. And in my experience, most daycares are able to work well with this request. And I would even venture to say they're often grateful to have that schedule provided so that they aren't left trying to figure out your baby's ideal nap times. Question number 4. Are babies allowed to have a bottle in the crib? The answer to this question should be no. I don't recommend that a baby ever have their bottle in the crib. I also recommend you ask how they handle feedings in general. This is not even specifically related to sleep, it's just a safety issue. Until your baby can hold their own bottle, you want a care provider to be holding that bottle for them while they're eating. You don't want them propping the bottle up with pillows, blankets, etc., as that is a choking hazard, as is having the bottle in the crib. Number 5, are babies allowed to sleep anywhere other than the crib? You want to ask this question because infants should absolutely not be allowed to sleep in their car seat at daycare. There is a known increased risk of SIDS when babies sleep in their car seats, and there have been incidents where babies have passed away at daycare in their car seats. If babies are allowed to sleep somewhere other than their crib, let's say a swing or a bouncer, be sure you understand the circumstances and that you are comfortable with how they handle these situations. As always, it's important to understand the safe sleep guidelines. I'm going to go ahead and link to those in the show notes if you don't already know where they are. Question number 6. If a baby is struggling to nap at daycare, how do you navigate that or handle that situation? All right, so in the best case scenario, it's going to take a couple of weeks for most babies to adjust to napping at daycare. But for some babies, even beyond the first couple of weeks, napping can be very challenging. I like to say that napping at most daycares is the equivalent of you or I trying to lay down on the couch and nap in the middle of a raging party. It's tricky to nap in a room that has a lot of stimulating things happening, particularly an infant room where babies are often on different schedules. And so some babies are playing, the caregivers are talking to entertain them as they should be. Babies are being changed, babies are being fed, babies are happy, babies are crying, babies are laughing. There is a lot happening. And I think it's helpful to understand how the daycare will support your baby if they are really struggling to nap in this environment. Will someone be able to help your baby get to sleep by, jiggling them, putting their hand on their chest and rocking them, or just holding them and rocking them, or popping the pacifier in if it's popping out? Another example would be in our situation, Addison, my oldest, really struggled to nap at daycare when she was an infant. Of course, part of the reason it was a struggle was because we didn't have her on a solid nap schedule at home, and she wasn't even sleeping well at home until she was about 2 years old. So, as you can imagine, she was really struggling in this stimulating environment. But when she was having a really hard day, they weren't able to do this every day, but when she was having a really hard day, the daycare director would take her out of that infant room and she would hold her on her lap for a nap. And once we nailed down her sleep schedule and I was able to give daycare more guidance, that wasn't necessary. But I was grateful that they tried to help her when I was not in a position to help her. So, these are the type of things you want to understand. If your baby's really struggling to sleep at daycare, which of course we hope they won't be, how do they tackle that to help your child get more sleep? Question number 7. Do you allow sleep sacks and or pacifiers? Most daycares that my clients use allow sleep sacks and pacifiers. There have been some exceptions, but typically in the infant room at least, they do. So if you use a sleep sack at home, I do recommend that you have a sleep sack for daycare as well, because it's just a cue to sleep and they will start to associate the sleep sack with sleep, which can be helpful for daycare naps. I think pacifiers can really help some babies nap better at daycare because it provides another form of soothing when they're trying to nap in that busy, stimulating room. So, of course, some babies don't like pacifiers, and if they don't take one at home, they're likely not going to take one at daycare. So, don't stress about that. But it's important to understand what is allowed to help them with their napping. Is a sleep sack allowed and or a pacifier? And if they are and you're using them at home, send them to daycare as well. Number 8. Tell me how you track naps and how accurate the nap tracking is. When my girls were in daycare, they did not have the great daycare apps that most daycares have now. But we did get this little piece of paper at every pickup that told us down to the minute what time they fell asleep and what time they woke up from each nap. Knowing this, whether it's on a piece of paper or through an app, is hugely helpful because it allows you to decide if you can go home and forge ahead with a typical evening schedule, or if you should shift your mindset a little bit and focus on getting your little one to bed early to help them make up for a crummy day of sleep at daycare. Question number 9. Are babies allowed to sleep on their stomach? The answer for the infant room should be that they always put babies in the crib on their backs. Once your baby has learned to roll over on their own and they start to sleep on their tummy at home, it's okay if the daycare provider allows your little one to go in on their back and roll to their tummy and take their naps if you are comfortable with that. But you want to make sure that they will put your baby down on their back when they go in the crib, and they will continue to have them sleep on their back until you have told them otherwise. Question number 10. What age do you transition down to one nap per day, and what time will that nap take place? If there is one thing I wish I could change about daycares in the United States specifically, it would be the transition down to one nap. The age that they transition down to one nap more specifically. The very vast majority of daycares make this transition at 12 months. So if you get that answer, while it's not ideal, it is typical. Recently, however, I've had a handful of clients whose babies have been transitioned down to one nap at daycare earlier than 12 months. If they tell you anything earlier than 12 months, I would push back on this. And I would consider this as something you should put in the downside column when you're thinking about choosing a daycare. Question number 11. What age do you transition children to napping on a cot or a mat? Parents are often shocked when a daycare tells them their toddler is going to switch rooms and in the new room, they will start napping on a mat or a cot rather than in a crib. First of all, I want to tell you that kids do amazingly well with this transition. And even though I watched my own kids do well with it, and I have watched hundreds and hundreds of my clients' children do well with it, it still blows me away. I've decided it just must be the combination of these little toddlers understanding the expectation of their care providers and that peer pressure. All the other kids are doing it, so hey, why not? A lot of daycares will transition children to napping on a cot or a mat by the age of 2. Recently, however, I've had some clients whose daycare transitions kids to mats at 12 months. While it's not out of the question that a 12-month-old can nap on a mat, I'd much prefer a daycare wait until at least 18 months, if not 2 years. And I want to note something to you all. And if you are not focused, tune back in. Just because your child naps well on a mat or a cot at daycare, it does not mean that they are ready to transition out of the crib at home. If you haven't listened to episode 26, it's called 5 Myths About the Crib to Bed Transition. Be sure to check it out because I discuss this more in that episode. But I think it's important to understand when they plan to make this transition and then decide if it's something that is ideal for you. That's a bit of a tricky recommendation because most people aren't even really comfortable with the transition happening between 18 and 24 months. So I want to encourage you to not worry about that too much. But I don't love the transition happening at that 12-month mark, and I'm seeing more and more of that. So it's something I wanted to include here. And finally, question number 12. Do you ever wake children from a nap or cap their naps if they are taking a longer nap than is ideal? So, this question comes into play more with our preschool age children. I work with a lot of kids in this age group who aren't sleeping well at night. And sometimes one of the factors playing into that is that their sleep isn't properly allocated or balanced between day sleep and night sleep. So they may be taking a great, amazing 3-hour nap at daycare, but the truth is 2 hours would be more appropriate. So that 3 hours can be disruptive to their bedtime or nighttime sleep. It's ideal if a daycare is willing to cap a nap at a reasonable length. And if they won't, it's important for you to understand that and that could potentially be something that you're going to need to navigate. So I've looked into this a little bit because I have a lot of clients whose children's daycares / preschools are unwilling to wake them from a nap. And it seems to me from my research that it varies state to state. And I don't know the laws or regulations related to naps at daycare in every state. But here's what I will tell you I've learned in my poking around on various states. Most states require that daycares provide children with the opportunity to nap. And I applaud that. I totally agree. I think that's critically important. But I'll also note that a lot of states don't actually say that a child cannot be woken from a nap. So this is something you may want to look into depending on where you live. You should look into the rules or regulations in your state. And even if it turns out, whether it's because of the regulations or just because that's the policy of your daycare, that they will not wake them from a nap, it's just something you want to understand and go into with eyes wide open. I do cover how to navigate improving nighttime sleep, even if a daycare or preschool won't wake your child from a nap, inside my Your Preschool Sleep Champion program, which I will link to in the show notes if you want some additional advice or support there. All right, those are the 12 sleep-related questions that I recommend you consider asking when you're visiting potential daycares. And if you'd like to download the document with all of these questions written out for you, you can visit AllisonEgidi.com /daycare-questions, or follow the link in the show notes. I hope you found this helpful, and if you did, would you please do me a huge favor? Take a moment to rate, review, and follow the podcast. Your support will help me reach more parents who could benefit from an episode like this. Thanks in advance, and I will see you back here next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to How Long Till Bedtime. To learn how we can work together to improve your child's sleep, pleep and wellnesscoach.com.